Originally developed and published by LucasArts and released in 1995, Dark Forces is a science fiction shooter set in the Star Wars galaxy. Powered by its own unique Jedi engine, the title played a significant role in advancing shooter mechanics, affording players the ability to look up and down, jump, and crouch. And to assure such abilities would prove useful, the game's environments featured multiple levels, moving platforms, conveyor belts, and elevators, along with visual effects such as fog, smoke, and atmospheric haze. Players were also given a flashlight and several opportunities to employ it, though the blaster bolts in darker areas of the map were especially impressive. Aside from that, the graphics were pretty standard for the time, and the controls were honestly a bit clunky. They took some getting used to, but given the complexity of the game's design, it felt worth it. Dark Forces wasn't just another run and gun. In addition to weapons, Darren Stinnett and his talented team included a few other useful gadgets, several environmental puzzles, and mission objectives based on an entertaining story. Overall, Dark Forces was a kick-ass game. The cutscenes and voice acting were especially awesome at the time, as that sort of thing was still relatively new and seemed like a pretty neat idea. Not only that, but this was also the first time gamers would be given the chance to experience Star Wars from the first-person perspective. While not everybody loved it, it had its fans, and like everything else Star Wars, the tendency is to completely overdo the hell out of it. Gamers were already modding Doom levels to look like the Death Star before Dark Forces ever hit store shelves, so why not take it to the extreme? Aside from the ensuing tsunami of mods, Hasbro released a line of toys based on characters in the game. There was a novelization of the game's story, and even an audio dramatization of the novelization. It was only a matter of time, and so no one, gamer or otherwise, were surprised by the release of a remaster, and that remaster is what we're here to talk about. Remastered and published by Night Dive Studios and released in February 2024, Dark Forces Remastered is surprisingly well done. Not all of Night Dive's re-releases have hit the mark. Blade Runner was especially bad, and they have an annoying habit of charging too much for these titles. Be that as it may, I very much appreciate what they've done here. In my very humble opinion, Dark Forces Remastered is an excellent example of what a remaster should look like. Powered by the Kex engine, the remaster manages to capture the spirit of the original release perfectly, while polishing both the visuals and player control for a more modern look and feel. And that's all a remaster should do. Night Dive have done a fine job of keeping it simple, and the result is a very playable and even more accessible version of a well-loved classic. It's certainly worth mentioning they've polished the soundtrack as well, though no matter what version of this game you play, the music is awesome. Other audio, such as sound effects and voice acting, appear to have been cleaned up as well. As mentioned earlier, the voice acting in Dark Forces is very good, and not just for the time either. It's good by any standard. The game stars Nick Jameson in the lead role as player character Kyle Katarn, Julie Eccles as Jan Ors, Jack Angel as Rom Mok, Peggy Roberts Hope as Mon Mothma, and Scott Lawrence as Darth Vader. The script was penned by the game's artist Justin Chin and is very worthy of the name Star Wars. It's certainly a lot better than the dogshit Disney's been dishing up lately, that's for sure. And the Dark Troopers, from which the game gets its title, would later become canon according to The Mandalorian, so that's kind of cool, I guess. I mean, that's kind of the only good Star Wars, maybe. I'm not really sure how I feel about The Mandalorian yet. Anyway, since he did such a good job of stealing the plans for the Death Star, the Rebel Alliance has decided to once again solicit the services of Kyle Katarn, a former member of the Imperial Army turned mercenary. This time, they need him and his partner Jan Ors to investigate a devastating attack on one of their bases. This investigation, of course, turns up evidence of the aforementioned Dark Troopers, a powerful new adversary developed and employed by the vile Galactic Empire. From there, Kyle and Jan embark on a harrowing adventure to combat this new threat, which of course will require them to visit several different and exotic locations. The game boasts 14 unique levels, some dark and dingy, others brightly lit and clean. All of them feel like Star Wars, and all of them are an absolute blast. Though it's important to note the runtime for this title is just under 3 hours, though it could potentially take a bit longer for new players. A few of the puzzles are somewhat challenging. To aid them in their short quest, players are given a variety of weapons, including but not limited to a blaster pistol, blaster rifle, fusion cutter, various other energy weapons, a missile launcher, and of course the iconic thermal detonator. A few gadgets will be either necessary or simply helpful depending on the mission and the difficulty setting. These include but are not limited to infrared goggles, spiked ice climbing cleats, and a gas mask. Mission objectives range from gathering intelligence to sabotage and destruction, and even the occasional prison break. As far as retro shooters are concerned, this title in particular is one of the very best of those responsible for shaping the genre, not only for its contributions to level design and gameplay mechanics, but also for the inclusion of a detailed narrative complete with well-written and well-acted cinematic cutscenes. Dark Forces was and still is a very fun game to play, and because Night Dive have done such a fine job of polishing this gem, I believe it is even more fun to play now than it was before. The combat is much faster and more intense, complemented by enhanced visual and audio effects along with an exquisite cinematic soundtrack. Having said that, it's definitely worth noting that Night Dive have also included a multitude of options concerning the enhancements, enough that players are practically given the option to completely shut them off in order to emulate an experience almost indistinguishable from the original, though I would have liked to have seen some legacy controls for the title's more die-hard fans. The game also includes a very modest vault of behind-the-scenes style extras for those that are interested. The vault contains some interesting tidbits, but it's certainly not as extensive or impressive as it could have been. Of course, all of this is only my opinion, and while I happen to like this remaster very much, I am still a fan of the original. I do have both versions of the game and enjoy each of them for different reasons. Dark Forces Remastered is a remaster after all, not a replacement. I'd recommend picking it up on sale though, given that it is a remake and does have a very short runtime. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll consider joining me again in the next one, and as always, if you made it this far, happy gaming and thanks for watching.